couple of years there's a show that comes along that divides people into one of two camps. The first camp is comprised of all of those people who love this show unconditionally, flaws and all. And it's these people who will defend the show like nothing else in existence matters. And the second camp is filled with people who can't see anything but that show's flaws. And they just cannot understand the blind acceptance of everyone in camp number one. So much so that they ridicule anyone who does not agree with them that the show in question is complete shit. These are the kind of shows that get labeled as either controversial, overrated, or shonen. They're treated like politics. You're not allowed to sit on the fence. You have to pick a side. You're either with me, or you're with them. Which makes my position on a show called Sword Art Online rather difficult. Because you see, I could finish an episode of this show, sit back and be all, man, that was a good episode. But then I have this little voice in the back of my head, decked out in my reviewer outfit and everything, going, wow, okay. Wait, you're serious? Well, allow me to laugh harder. Ladies, gentlemen, and others, my name is Arcada, and welcome to Glass Reflection. Today, the highly controversial anime of 2012, Sword Art Online. Let's jam. In the year 2022, a genre of video games exists called virtual reality massively multiplayer online role-playing games. One such game in this genre is the newly released Sword Art Online, that coupled with a virtual reality helmet allows players to control their in-game avatars with their minds, as if they are actually living there, in that virtual world. Of course, everything is fun in games until the mysterious creator of SAO removes the player's ability to log out, trapping them in this world until they complete his challenge. They must band together and defeat the 100 floors of the game before they are allowed to leave. And it becomes much more of a game when they are informed that, in SAO, if you die for real. No do-overs, no respawns.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
Astute viewers may recognize the premise's similarity with that of the Dot Hack franchise, not only because both of them take place in a virtual MMO, but because they both involve players being trapped inside a game, unable to escape. But the differences between the two are simple. One involves people standing in a circle, talking, and the other involves a life-or-death survival game that is f***ing awesome. Try and guess which is which. One of the reasons why I believe SAO to be as popular as it is because of how well it knows its audience. Whether you like it or not, on both sides of the ocean, a very large portion of the otaku viewer base are also avid gamers, and it is unlikely that they have never at one time played an MMO before, the entire MMO genre being well known for its repetitively addictive nature. So to create a story that capitalizes largely on this fact was a brilliant idea in many cases, as it plays to the want and desires of those viewers who would generally do anything they could to be involved and play in this game that the characters are in. Heck, I bet even some of them would want to be trapped in this world so that they can avoid the mysterious thing known as real life. And maybe it's because of all of this that people are just willing to completely ignore all the flaws just so that they can have their nice, little, perfectly constructed fantasy. Speaking of flaws... By far, one of the most disappointing factors of this entire show is its characterization and development, or lack thereof, of the show's major characters. First off is our male protagonist Kirito, a male gamer from Japan who began to play video games to escape his family and the real world. Kirito is a power gamer, obsessed with being a strong character, though is also a lone wolf, and even though he plays games that are designed to be, well, you know, multiplayer, he goes solo. A lot of people bring up the topic of how Kirito is a wish fulfillment character, and while I would much rather have used a different term to describe him because that makes me sound a little more original, it's hard because that's exactly what he is. Everything has a habit of going his way. He overpowers basically everyone he encounters, whether he should or not. He's higher level than most players, regardless of the fact that he adventures solo and not with a party, something which any MMO player will tell you does not happen. He's able to complete superhuman feats, not even possible by the system because f*** it, he's Kirito, and over the course of the series, develops his own harem, with everything from token lollies to cat girls and his cousin. No, seriously. And there's another thing. I'm not one to say that girls don't exist on the internet, because I know that they do. I know quite a few girls on the internet. But it would be safe to say that the female population of Sword Art Online would be a rather small minority, don't you think? And yet all of these women look super hot, making me question why they are playing online games to begin with, but also why they more often than not end up falling for our antisocial hero, Kirito, for no goddamn reason. Next up is the supposed lead female character, Azuna. I say supposed because besides being heavily featured in the show's first opening, as well as being one of the main plot devices for the entire second half, she is one of the most neglected characters in terms of development and stereotyping that I have seen in a long time. She starts off well enough, being introduced in episode 2 as a new player who, even though does not know the game very well, plays exceptionally well and is more or less a complete badass already. Unfortunately, by her next appearance in episode 5, after the plot goes and gets sidelined with filler, she gets transformed from lead female badass into token tsundere love interest, with moments few and far between to show otherwise, before ultimately becoming Princess Peach for the entire latter half of the show, if you know what I mean. The characterization towards her that just pisses me off. In an industry where strong female protagonists are few and far between, you have this character that starts off with amazing potential to become something like a young Motoko Kusanagi. Sure, she's only 16 years old and can't exactly be like the Major, but something in that direction was completely possible. Instead, I feel like they pulled a Metroid Other M and just completely disrespected her character by making her reliant on a man to save her. Like, why do people always confine the main characters into the same freaking archetype?
It's a fucking anime, that's why! The pilots are always whiny little shit children!
The secondary characters all have very little screen time on their own, usually focused on for one episode and then forgotten to make way for the massively important character that is Kirito. And the only other character to get much screen time at all is that of Leafa, a player who helps Kirito in his journey of the second half of the show, since Azuna is unfortunately detained. And as much as I like Leafa, she gets sidelined just as much as Azuna did, with her only major defining factor being her fanservice avatar and her love for Kirito, despite the fact that she doesn't have a chance with him. And of course, some other things. Spoilers! Sorry about that. The story of SAO is in fact the most tragic thing about the whole show, even more so than the characters. It takes a special something to have a premise with as much potential as this one, only to railroad everything and employ time jumps whenever possible. The first half of the show is by far the most guilty of this, condensing 2 whole years of time into the first 12 episodes, with several months of unused time just filling up the in-between spaces, all the while the viewer is presented with what could be classified as filler episodes. Yeah, sure, there's an overarching story, but it's downplayed more or less the entire time. We have to get to the 100th floor, but first we're going to help this token lolly, and then we're going to make a sword with the help of this chick, and oh, now we're going to go fishing because everybody loves fishing in video games. For all the negative points I mentioned though, there are moments of clarity when the story just really grabs you. The most interesting aspect of the show early on is that of the death penalty. As previously mentioned, you die, and that's it. It could have been used as an excuse to make the story less like a game and more like an actual fictional fantasy universe with, you know, real life or death consequences, but it became so much more than that. They spend time making sure that you feel the weight of death in this world, and just how emotional losing people for good can be. And it's not something that is usually focused on. The midpoint of the show also decides to throw a wrench in, well, everything by completely changing the overall plot of the show to something more or less completely different. Almost as if the entire first half was just a prologue as to what would follow. I can't really explain much of the second half without veering heavily into spoiler territory, so here are some reaction shots. What the hell is happening?
Hey, listen! Hey, listen!
You expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die. Oh, okay, you're actually gonna play this card. Well then. Alright, at least it can't get any worse. Oh, for fuck's... The animation for Sword Ass Online from A1 Pictures is stunning. It's one of the merits of the show that not many can argue against. In the past, A1 Pictures have been known for shows like Black Butler, Anohana, and Sound of the Sky, and while the production values for those shows tended to be higher than most, they never had the same amount of action that SAO does. And it's the fight scenes where the animation truly shines, showing the vast expanses of this online world for all to see. As well as, you know, fan service, because why the hell not? For those of you unaware, I am a Yuki Kajiura fanboy. I have taken to watching shows only because she was the one to have done the music for it. So while I would like to give her full points on this soundtrack merely for just existing, I can't. Mainly because as good as this soundtrack is, and trust me, it is very good, there is no specific song on this soundtrack that I would like to listen to on its own without visual accompaniment, which is rare for Kajiura. Madoka Magica had a myriad of choir tracks that stood out, Tsubasa had the Song of Storm and Fire, Garden of Sinners had the fantastic M12+13, and Kajiura's work on the entire .hack franchise had more good singles than I can possibly mention right now, so it was really disappointing that there were no standout tracks this time around. The show also sports 2 openings and endings, the only notable one of which was opening number 1, Crossing Field by Lisa. Originally, I didn't think much of this opening, it seemed rather generic when I first heard it, but over time it grew on me, mainly because of moments in the track like this. And I love that kind of build-up in a song. You can just imagine the drummer sitting there with his sticks getting ready to twirl them and just go, it is awesome. Plus, the song is available on iTunes for like $1, so go buy that shit. Sword Art Online is a perfect example of misused potential. It hooks you early on with a strong opening, before meandering in filler, getting off track with a thinly veiled overall story arc, and not developing its major characters as well as it could have. And that's even before they reach the halfway point. The second story arc continues the depressing downward spiral with numerous unexplained plot devices, a pointless romantic subplot, and a final villain who is more laughable than menacing. Not to mention, what I consider to be the most important question asked in the entirety of the show was never answered. Why did the creator of the SAO video game trap all those players? Was it just a game of his? Did he have a god complex? Or was it a more personal or deeply psychological issue? We may never know, well, unless you read the light novels most likely. On the plus side, though the show may have plummeted from an attempted rise up the mountain of anime greatness, the ride down was, to some degree, highly enjoyable. If for no other reason than to just watch the continual supply of fail. Very pretty fail, I might add, with a soundtrack by Yuki Kajiura and everything. Plus, I honestly believe that the early episode handled that death aspect of the setting really well, and it was a shame that they dropped the impact of the topic so quickly. Also, for the most part, the ending of the whole show, well, it was somewhat satisfying, which is more than I can say for other shows, and hell, I always say that the ending is paramount, and it could have ended a lot worse, so major props there. With all that in mind, I have meticulously calculated values for the categories of story, characters, animation, sound, and my own personal enjoyment, after which tossing it into a cage, having it escape and almost raped by tentacles before throwing it right back into said cage, has me awarding Sword Art Online with a 7.5 out of 10, and a recommendation to stream it rather than buy. It's worth the watch certainly, but only buy it if you know you already like it. And thankfully you can stream it, because at the time of this video, SAO is available for streaming over on Crunchyroll. And though at this exact moment it does not have a DVD release, it has been licensed by Aniplex, so a DVD release is most likely forthcoming, expensive as their releases tend to be. And the show should also end up being distributed at some point by Mad Men for those people who live in Australia. If you live in Europe though, you're kinda shit out of luck for the time being. Smoke 'em if you got 'em or something. As far as alternate anime recommendations, one would think that .hack Sign would be a very good choice. But considering that that show is boring as sin, I will instead point you towards Excel World, as it is by the same original author, and Fate Zero, because I haven't yet had a chance to properly recommend this show yet, and it seems like a good time because it was freaking awesome. So go watch it. And with that, I leave you. Until next time, ladies, gentlemen, and others, stay frosty.